Hey guys, it's Ashley and welcome to day 3 of my 12 days of BOOKMAS video marathon. Today I'm going to be talking about the most surprising books that I read in 2020. The books on this list were the ones that I didn't really have any expectations for, and yet they still managed to blow me away. So without further ado, let's get started. 2 of these books that I'll be mentioning in this video were also the same ones that I mentioned in the last video, so I'll try to mix them in here and pick out some different ones. First up, we have Bear Town by Frederick Backman. If you haven't already heard me rave about this book every time I mention it, here it is again. This book was amazing. This story is about this small town in Sweden that is home to a couple of hockey teams. Hockey is their life. Hockey is what is keeping the town running. Hockey is what's giving the people hope for, more infrastructure and more funds being funneled into the town and things like that. If they are able to win the hockey championship or whatever it's called, then they will be put on the map essentially. So the story revolves around a couple of the hockey players as well as a couple of the people who live in the town. It tackles some very heavy subjects, including sexual assault and rape, so be aware if you are going into this. I had a feeling when I was going into this that I was going to enjoy it at least a little bit. I knew that Frederick Backman, and specifically this book, people have been talking about for years now. I know a couple of people who have the same reading tastes that I do really enjoyed this story, so I knew somewhat going into it that I was going to enjoy it at least a little bit, at least like the borderline of enjoyment. I would hit that, but I did not expect this book to give me such a visceral, emotional reaction than I did when I actually read it. This story manages to touch on like everything that's bad about society and like a community and like a groupthink sort of mindset, but then also pull it together in the end, and again, like I mentioned in a video or 2 before, give you some sort of hope. Like pull it together and really make you like think about all of that while also kind of giving you the light at the end of the tunnel. It was so good. If you haven't read any of Frederick Backman's stuff, I highly recommend it, at least based off of this book and based off of the, recommendations that you guys have been giving me since I said that I loved this book. So good, and I cannot wait to read more of his work. Next up, we have one of the ones that I mentioned in my previous video that should have gone up yesterday, and that is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This book was an insane surprise to me because I have never been a classics person unless, like I mentioned, it was for school. Classic books tend to sort of sail right over my head, right? And today I have a pretty high head because of my hat, but they still tend to sail over it. With Pride and Prejudice, I was expecting to not fully grasp everything that was happening in certain scenes because of the language. That's just how classic books are. Classics are sometimes hard to understand because of the syntax and the structure, and I anticipated that going into this, which is why I listened to it on audio while I was reading physically. And I do have to say, it totally helped because I was able to visualize everything as it was coming at me, as it was happening, and I was able to see like the full picture of this story and really like understand why people love it so much. It's so good. So yeah, this was definitely a surprise for me. I was not expecting to enjoy it as much as I did. I was not expecting to enjoy the movie as much as I did. And yet I did, and here we are. The next surprise that I had for 2020 was The Silence of Bones by June Her. If you've been with me since the summer, you might have seen my readathon vlog where I decided randomly last minute to participate in this readathon that was hosted by Monica and Chloe from Books with Chloe and Monica Kim, but she used to be She Might Be Monica, if that's not still her channel. I'm not 100%, but Monica and Chloe hosted this readathon and I participated in it. And this was their group book. That was the main reason that I picked this book up, because it was their group book and I had never heard of this. I had never heard of what it was about. I didn't know anything about it, but they were gonna read it for their group book and I was like, you know what? I'm branching out of my comfort zone. Why the heck not? So I bought this book and I read it and it was so good. It was such a surprise that I just was not expecting. If you haven't heard me talk about this book already, it's set in the 1800s in the Joseon era in Korea. It follows a young girl named Sol who is a servant to the police bureau. During the Joseon era, there were certain rules that applied to men and women. Men were not able to touch like women's bodies, were not able to look at women, like that sort of thing when it came to police and like murder mystery cases kind of things. So that's why they had to have female servants in a way. They were indentured servants or whatever they were called, I can't remember, so that they would be able to do that for them so that the men didn't have to look at bodies or whatever. I don't know. So we follow this young girl named Soul, and there is this high profile wealthy woman who is murdered, and they're trying to figure out the case and nobody really knows what to make of it, and so she decides to dig a little deeper into it, and she finds out some stuff that kind of takes you on a bit of a wild ride. The story is extremely atmospheric. It really just brings like the dark, moody sort of sense to it. To be honest, the entire time that I was reading this, I imagined it was like nighttime and it was like slowly drizzling. You know, like a really light drizzle rain during the night, and like a girl's just like walking down the street and there's like lampposts and stuff. That's what I was imagining. That's the entire like atmosphere of this story. And I've said this before about this book too, but there are so many twists and turns in this story that you will not be expecting. I'm telling you, it's so good. Next up is one that you all know that I absolutely adored, and that is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McKinston. The reason that this is on my most surprising reads of 2020 list is because I went into this thinking that it was going to be a super cute like rom-com between the first son of the United States and the Prince of England, right? And it is that, but it's so much better than just a cute rom-com. I love this story so much. It is adorable. It puts a smile on your face. It makes you laugh. It makes you feel things. Like, it's so good and sweet and cute and everything, and I love it to pieces. As I mentioned in a couple videos, I did actually read this book twice this year. So I read it for the first time in like February or March or something, and then I read it again in August or October or September, whenever the month was that I read it. But I read it twice this year, and if that doesn't go to show you that I loved this book, I don't know what will. Sometimes when I just want to feel like happiness in my life, I just pick up this book and just read like some of my favorite scenes, and it just makes everything better. The next surprise of 2020 was another book I mentioned in my last video yesterday, and that is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. Again, just like all of these, I did not really have any expectations going into this other than that I knew a lot of other people liked this story, and I was not expecting to like it as much as I did, but it really blew me away. This book is honestly pretty short, but it packs a mean punch with the story, and honestly I recommend reading it even if you're not really into adult contemporary or literary fiction or whatever this book is genred as, just because there's something about Celeste Ng's writing style that takes you to a different place, if that makes sense. I don't know, I really liked the way that this story was told, and I think that it really helped like put you in the mindset of these women. Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. I highly recommend. And then the last surprising read that I am going to be mentioning in this video is one that should not come as any surprise to you, and that is Scythe by Neal Shusterman. So I've talked about this in a couple videos, but if you don't remember, I actually started reading this one on audiobook first before I picked up the other two, and I had no reason to do this whatsoever. I actually started reading this months ago. I want to say in like January or March, or it honestly could have been last year in 2019 I started reading this. It was just a very long time ago that I started this audiobook, and I got maybe 30% of the way through and I just stopped reading it because I was like, I don't know, doing something else and not really wanting to pick up an audiobook or whatever. So this year I decided to get back into it, and I should not have stopped reading because it's so good. And it took me by such surprise that I, like, you know how I feel about this story. I devoured the last two books. I love this series to death. It's one of my favorites of all time now, and I just was not expecting it when I first got that audiobook. So yeah, for those reasons, this book is definitely on my surprising reads of 2020 list. Was not expecting anything out of it. Literally almost DNF'd this story and then kept going, and look at where we are now. Scythe is about this weird, like, futuristic world in which we've conquered death, and therefore to control the population, we rely on scythes, or humans who are appointed to kill people, essentially. So we follow these two characters, Citra and Rowan, who are taken under the wing of another scythe as his apprentices, and they basically learn what it takes to be a scythe and how to be a scythe, and all of the problems in this world and within the scythedom. which are a lot. And it turns into this wild ride of how do we save the world from what we have caused. It's so good, and it speaks to so many things that are happening in the real world on so many levels, and I just cannot recommend this story enough. And so you guys, those are the most surprising books that I read in 2020. I always love making this video because there are so many books that I go into throughout the year, and I just have no expectations, no, idea what the story is about, and I just go in, and some of these stories just really, I don't want to say blow me away again, but they truly blow me away. I've always been one to not read a synopsis as well before going into a story. I don't know why. When I do read the synopsis, it does help me understand what's happening, but for the most part, I don't end up reading the synopsis, and I still do okay. And for these stories, that's pretty much what happened. I knew a general idea, but had no idea what was actually going to happen, and damn if I didn't love them. So guys, let me know in the comments a surprising read that you had in 2020, one that you really didn't have any expectations over, or that you heard some things about but weren't really sure, and it just truly took you by surprise. And so other than all of that, I think that's going to be it for this video today. If you want to follow me on any of my socials, all of my handles are in the description below. Thank you guys so much for watching day 3 of my 12 days of BOOKMAS video marathon, and I will catch you later. Bye!